Moderator? You getting a sound check? Is that what you're doing? So as long as I keep talking into this thing, you can... No, we aren't going to let the girls talk because the guys, she's got to sit for the guy's voice. We didn't talk about who's going to start first. You want to start first? I'm supposed to start first? You got to introduce me.
Okay, we're going to get started without our moderator, and I'd like to introduce our good friend, Al Shaw. And actually, when we talked about this session, we're actually talking about two different animals, really. We're talking about the situation where you're in a club situation, or a dance, a regular dance, and then a festival situation with a large number of people there, and the situation's quite different. I'm not familiar with the club dance. I have never worked with a club where there was square dancing. I've always had a round dance club. I worked a few of the big festivals where I had to, go in and cue rounds between their tips, and then we run off to the round dance hall and do our thing. We've introduced ourselves. You can go now. Okay, and here's our moderator, Tim. Okay, it's on Canadian time. But Al has worked a lot with clubs, and so he's got most of the things to talk about, so I'm going to turn it over to Al.
Thank you, Brent. And I think most of you have met my wife, Linda. She's my manager. And I say that seriously because every time that she tells me to do something and I don't do it, I fall flat on my face. And so I ask her which songs to cue most of the time when we're working a club dance. And she can read the floor a little bit better than I can because she's not up front. And she's down there watching what the dancers are doing, and she is kind of detached from what is happening. And as you're all presenters, you know that you kind of see what's happening on the floor, but you don't hear the underlying current sometimes. And as a manager, I use her just to tell me what's going on. Now, what I've put on this sheet is just some of the points that I came up with, and this isn't going to be real formal. So anytime you want to butt in, just go ahead and ask questions, and we'll talk about things and discuss things that are happening and things that should happen. The first thing that I've got on there is communicate. Whenever we're working with somebody, we try to get a hold of them if we know that they're going to be there as soon as we can. Find out what's going on. Are they going to supply the equipment? And most of the callers, in fact, all of the callers I work with, supply the amp. Supply my own mic, and I've started using remote mic just recently. And I just go in and set my remote mic down and hook it into where I would normally hook my mic in. And I like the remote mic a whole lot better because I can stand up there and twiddle my thumbs or whatever else is happening, so I can see. But that's something that needs to be worked out with the caller before you get up on stage. You walk in, and this has happened to me twice in the last 6 months, is I walk in expecting to work with one caller, and there's a different caller on board. And, first of all, it takes you back because they don't always have the same equipment, and you know what you're planning on plugging into, and when that isn't there, then you may be left in lurch. So as a result of that, I've just started carrying everything that I need to hook up to any of the Hiltons. I have my amp or my preamp for my line and whatever, so I can hook up to any of the Hiltons, and we're all using Hiltons up there in the area. Contact the caller, know who the cuer will be, let the caller know who's going to be out there queuing with them. And that way, you get your communication started as early as possible. Amp. Reset the volume, guys. Reset the volume, gals. Whenever I get up there, and I forget it about a third of the time, but if you can leave something laying on the amp that you have to pick up, you'll remember to reset it. And this is for the people that are queuing. If there's something laying on that amp, whenever my caller goes to start calling again, something is wrong. And if they have to move something, something is wrong. So that gives them a little cue too that I've messed with something and I didn't remove it. So a little cue like that will help them rather than when they lay the record on and it comes blasting out because I really had to crank it up or something. So mic, remote mic versus hand mic. The cuers, there's only 2 of us cuers up there that are using remote mics in Boise right now, but we're both using a remote mic and just plugging in and not using the hand mic at all. That's good sometimes because in one club that we work with, at the break they have a little get-together session, and that way the president uses my remote mic for his little gathering, and everybody can hear. And you know how the most people that don't get used to using mics, the farther they pull the mic, the louder it gets, and they keep talking, and finally they might as well get rid of it because it's not doing them any good. But with the remote mic, it's right there all the time. Speaker, CD player, computer, hearing enhancement. Hearing enhancement is something that quite often we don't use except on occasion. I have seen a Hilton totally smoke with a hearing enhancement because it was plugged into the wrong plug. So if you're using the hearing enhancement, make sure that it's plugged into the right place. If I'm taking my hearing enhancement in and hooking it up, make sure I talk to the caller before I hook it up. And you know why? I should have started out with this. You know why this session was generated? About 3 years ago, I believe, when we were attending a CALLERLAB convention, we were in one of the sessions, and whoever was, I don't remember what session it was, but they were presenting, and they said, you know, it really bugs me because every time I'm doing the last tip, the cuer's putting up all of his gear. He's over there making noise on the sidelines, and all of this is happening. And the question was asked by myself or Linda, I don't remember which, have you ever talked to him? And they said, oh no, you can't talk to the cuer. Give me a break, folks. Talk to me. Tell me what I'm doing to bug you. You know, if I can fix it, I'll sure fix it. And I don't know of anything that I'm doing that I can't change. And same way with you. You know, when I'm working with a caller, I'm not afraid to tell you if there's something that you're doing that's bugging me. I mean, being backward is not one of my faults. As those of you that know me. Dress appropriately. Whoa, I missed one. One of my pet peeves, the caller carrying on a conversation in front of the podium. You know, I have seen this more often whenever I'm working with a weekend or something like that where the caller has come in, and it's natural for everybody to come up and talk to the caller immediately after his gets off the stage. And I have no problem with that. But when I get on there, I would like him to move off to the side, or her to move off to the side or back to the back, so I don't have to try to talk over top of them. And also so the round dancers don't have to try to listen through that conversation. And that's what I'm more concerned about than anything. You know, you may think, well, I'm talking quietly, but if you're in front of that speaker, it's all mixing, and the round dancers can't hear what's going on. So personally, I won't cue until the caller's off the floor. If the caller never leaves the floor, we'll never have a round. And that just happens to be the way it is, whether I'm working a club or a weekend or whatever. And it only takes a little quiet conversation with the caller. Say, hey, I'm ready to do my rounds. Please move it to the back. Take your conversation back there. And they can just kind of gather the whole group up and take them back. And there's no problem. And it only happens once every night. And then it's all solved. But that's my biggest pet peeve, probably. Dress appropriately. Being in the CALLERLAB office, I get a number of calls each year about a cuer being dressed inappropriately, or a cuer calling and a caller was dressed inappropriately. You know, and that's not something that I can solve from a CALLERLAB office, but I think we all should have enough professionalism that, you know, we work that. And appropriately is whatever is required for that dance. Sometimes it's a lot more fancy than others, you know. So I'm going to leave that one alone. Programming. I'm giving this same presentation at CALLERLAB also. So this programming is written more for CALLERLAB than it is for CALLERLAB, because most of you guys in CALLERLAB already know about programming. You know how you're going to start your dance, how you're going to build your dance, how you're going to relax it a little bit in the middle, take it up a little bit higher, drop off at the end, or whatever. A lot of the cuers do not know that. And a lot of the cuers will kill your dance before you get a third of the way through it. Because as you're getting to about the second tip, you know, the first one's probably to feel them out or something like that, from what I understand. The second one, you're going to take them and raise their level just a little bit and start playing with them a little bit. And about the end of that second tip, the cuer puts on a waltz that is so slow you can hardly move on it. And what happens to the dance? I mean, it drops on the floor right there. And you're not where you started the dance, you're below where you started the dance. And you have to, as callers, bring them back up again. After the cuer does that a time or two to you, you know, let them know about what's happening. Tell them, hey, here's how I work my program. And here's how I would like to do this. And you can help me by doing a little bit different rounds for me. I'm not real good on communicating, but there's ways of doing it. And if all else fails, just be blunt about it. Hey, this is what I'm trying to do to my dance, and you're hurting me as a cuer. So help me out, you know. And this will probably also hit our Around the Lab journal, too, once I get rolling on it. But, whoa.
I think I'm loud enough that I know we're taping, right? Don Casper from Mannheim, Germany, both a caller and a cuer and a member of CALLERLAB and CALLERLAB. It's not only perhaps the speed or of the dance piece that the cuer puts on, and sometimes too, but also the popularity of it. You'll have the floor is building up for the squares, and then the cuer will come along and do something, and he'll only have 3 or 4 couples on the floor, and that brings the mood of the dance down too, rather than trying to do something popular that keeps the floor full, even for the round dancers.
Yes, a very good point. You know, keep that floor as full as possible, and as a cuer, I try to work that and keep that floor as full as possible. Now, and that's where Linda comes in. She is there to say, hey, you don't do that dance here tonight because of whatever, and you aren't going to have the floor out there to take care of it.
Don Wiggins, Walla Walla, Washington. Do you do your waltzes first and your popular, or not popular, but your faster dancer second? When you do your waltz round first, and then you end with like a 2-step or a jive or something like that, or do you do it just the opposite? Because I find it difficult with my wife. Sometimes she'll do a slow waltz, which will bring the floor down on the second one, then I got to bring it back up. So I tell her to do the waltz first. Is that what you do?
Yes, you ask her. Yeah, you don't tell her. I do primarily try to do a waltz first if I'm doing 2. Now, most of the clubs in Boise that we dance with only do 1 round between tips, and on those I have to be very careful with which waltzes I can even use. And if I try to use the wrong waltz, Linda lets me know on those. But there's only like 3 or 4, maybe 5 waltzes that I will even consider using the first half of the dance. Now, the last between when I know the last tip's coming up, I normally do not worry about it because you're not going to totally kill the dance at that point, but you're still not going to help it any. But yes, if I'm doing 2, the waltz will always be first.
Dr. Mike Harris, Port St. Lucie. I'm a caller and she's a cuer. We have 2 tips in between or 2 rounds in between our tips. She tries to do a high and a low, and the high could be not as many on the floor, and the low one she does a phase 2 or a faster one, and the floor will fill up again, kind of ready for me the next time when I get on with a square.
Yeah, very good. And also another thing that we as cuers need to work on, and you as callers need to tell us about, is if we're doing pre-rounds for you. You know, if we do pre-rounds and we kind of set the pre-rounds up, my vision of pre-rounds is that I will do my harder pre-rounds at the very beginning. You know, the first 3 or 4, maybe even 5, because I can normally get 8 pre-rounds in a half hour. And my first minimum of 3 or 4 will be a phase 3, phase 4 type area, depending on what the floor can take. And then I'm going to drop to phase 2, because I want that floor full when a caller gets up. And I want the one right before the caller gets up to be a fast something. I don't care what it is, a 2-step. I've got a fast waltz that I can put on right before also that keeps them moving. And but it's got to be something that is moving before the caller gets on the first time. But it should not be fast enough that they're out of breath. It needs to be fast, keep it moving, but you know, and whenever you get up as a caller and the cuer has just killed your dance before you get it started, that's something else you need to talk to them about, you know, if they haven't done it. not everybody in CALLERLAB and RoundaLab is going to hear this. We're hoping that a lot of them will hear it, but let's face facts. They aren't going to come to convention. They may not read any flyer that comes out to them, so they aren't aware of the progressions quite often, to be truthful about it. Theme dances, spatial programming. I have worked in the club situation where everybody knew it was a theme dance but me. And that didn't happen very long ago for one of them. And you arrive at the dance thinking that, oh, it's just a regular old dance, and all of a sudden everybody's in this theme and everything I need to use is at home. So, had I known a little bit ahead of time, I could have helped the cause a little bit that night. But that's one of those things, as a caller, make sure the cuer knows that if you're going to work a theme. And you can work a theme together for any reason, whatever, anytime, any night. And that's, as long as you're letting each other know, communicate. Theme song. What was the song? I didn't write it down. The song that you said, babe, that, I don't remember what it was right now. But there's a few songs out there where there's a round dance written and there's a square dance with the same title. Chaka Chaka. Okay. That's a good one. There's some out there anyway. Sometimes these will follow well behind each other. Sometimes they will not work for nothing. So you need to be aware of, the cuer does of what's going to drag the dance down, what's going to hurt the dance, more than worrying about what the colors are. The colors are going to, primarily when you're going to a square dance with rounds between, it's a square dance with support, supposedly. And that's the way it should be viewed, whether it is or not, by the cuers. A lot of us have big egos, just like you guys. Where was I? What level are the squares and rounds? Sometimes at these, if you have two, you can do a high level and a low level. In Boise, Idaho, you better do them both low levels, or better do the one low level. It doesn't matter, because the square dance, the round dancers at square dances normally are not above a phase 2 level. They may do a very few phase 3s, but that's going to be it. The higher round dance levels are going to primarily round dances, and that's all. They aren't coming out to the squares. So you're going to read your floor there and know ahead of time, if you're working out of area, what they can handle, what they can't handle. How many rounds between tips? We beat that to death too. Was talking to who? Henry Isaac from ACA, I think is where he's from. Anyway, we were at the arts meeting down in Texas here about a month ago. Was talking to him about programming and this kind of stuff and what all. And he says, when I walk into a new club, and he does a lot of going around to different clubs, the first person I talk to is a cuer. Because a cuer can tell me what kind of music they like. If they're not a country music lover, maybe they want all rock, maybe they want alternative, maybe they want something else. He's got enough stuff in his box that he can pull out what he needs to for that night. So use the cuer as a resource. Say, how fast do they want to dance? If it looks like everybody's 80 years old or above, probably they want to slow dance a little bit, or dance a little bit slower. However, there are those 80-plus clubs that want to go like crazy, and maybe not all night, but at least 2 or 3 tips a night. So the cuer can give you that kind of information. Use them. How long do they like the tips? Up in Boise, if you run a tip more than about probably 7 minutes is the max you're going to get away with. You might get 10, but you're not going to get 2 of them in a row. They're going to be walking off, or not walking off the floor, but they won't get up the next tip. And one club we work with, if you reset the record more than once, or go through it more than once and a half, they'll just sit down the next time. They won't even bother getting up. So the cuer can kind of cue you in on what's happening on that if you're new to the club. Is there a snack break during the dance or at the end? Some of our Boise clubs like to take a snack break for 20 minutes in the middle. Some of them like to take a break for 20 minutes in the middle and have a snack at the end. And that will help in the programming. You can kind of figure, well, I need to have my dance finished at 9 o'clock because that's when the first break is. And really, I can tell you that one club we dance with, the dance is over at 9 o'clock, but we go till 10. And so you've got to work everything you can in that first hour. You've got to really push it. After the break, you just put on 3 or 4, you know, you get, sometimes we get two tips and sometimes we get 3 after the break. But it's just kind of, you're out there on the floor after that break, just the way it runs. And we live with it because we know that's the way it's done. How's the money collected? That is something that, you know, is different in every club probably in the United States and all over the world. Some people have their own honor box. Some people have a certain lady pick it up out of the tip. Sometimes it's picked up other ways. Some people charge us the way they come in. But it can affect the dance either way, especially if it's and the cuer, if he's working with a caller that hasn't been to the floor before, needs to remind the caller what's happening just before he's supposed to pick it up or have it picked up. What time do the majority of the people leave the dance? You know, in Boise, you can bet that they will be there until 9 o'clock, whether they're dancing or not. And we have in one club, well, we just last Friday, we commented after we got home, there were 2 squares came out that did not dance. They just came out to socialize, and that's fine, but you have to realize that. You know, and if I had a new caller coming in there and he gets up front and these same 2 squares of people, he never saw them get on the floor all night, he doesn't know that they're not mad at him. He just thinks, well, something is wrong with those and I'm not calling to get those folks up. So ask the cuer, what is going on back there? Why aren't they getting up for me? Well, 5 of them had just gotten out of the hospital in the last week. So they aren't going to get on the floor, but they came out to say hi anyway. You know, and that's things that the caller needs to know that the cuer may know if you're new to the area. People to watch, those not to watch, and those that will never be in the correct place. The cuer will know who they are. Ask them, and they can tell you this guy will always be in the right place, but you don't know how he got there. One thing that I have done since probably the first year I started cueing was when I'm in the square and I'm promenading, if I'm in the right spot, the caller will see me shaking my head. If I'm not in the right spot, or if I square is down, I'll give him a down signal. I have no clue where we are, and he's going to have to rely on somebody else to get us home. If I know that the square is correct, I'll give him a, yeah, we're okay as we're coming around, and then he can, you know, let's go on home rather than fixing it on the way home. Pre-rounds, this was Linda's add-on. Pre-rounds warms the dancers up and gives the caller a full floor for the first tip. One club we were working with was having trouble getting a square at 8 o'clock, wasn't it? 8 o'clock they were starting. I mean, by 8:30 they would finally have sometimes 2 squares. By 8:15 they would have their first square. And the dance started at 8 o'clock. So we went in and started doing rounds for them ahead of time. And doing rounds for them ahead of time gave them 2 squares to start with at 8 o'clock. And, you know, that's something the cuer can do to help you out. Is if you're having trouble getting folks in the door, get some round dancers out there first. At least that gives you something to work with right to begin with. You don't have to, the people that are there, you know, for 2 or 3 weeks in a row and they don't have enough to fill a square are going to get antsy and not come back, is what's going to end up happening. So to help them out, bring some rounds in or do something else to, and that's where your caller can kind of help. Sound control, music too loud or soft, voice too loud or soft. The cuer can help the caller and the caller can help the cuer on this. You know, if you're really blasting, we went to one of the surprise callers that I was working with about a month ago. We only had 2 squares on the floor, but I know that we could have heard the music and voice at the airport, which was about 2 miles away. And I tried to call him down all night, but he was set that night, so we just worked with it. But the cuer and caller need to help each other back and forth on that. And Linda will get out there and tell me if I'm too loud or soft. And see, like right now, I have no clues, but I hope it's working okay. I just got new ears. And these new ears, I mean, they brighten things up a lot. So I'm doing fine. Have I what? They're a lot bigger than the last ones. The question was, are they bigger? Yes, they are. I can listen. I can hear things with them now. Yep. Courtesies. Toward the end of the dance somewhere, I try to thank the caller that I'm working with. And I try to do that as I'm finishing the tip that I know is going, or the round that I know is going to be my last round. As I bring him on for the last time or her on for the last time, I say, you know, this was a great time working with him tonight, and thank him, bring him on with another round of applause, and get him back up on the stage. 90% of the time they will do that at the same time. The other 10%, you'll get it right afterwards, and as they do their closing remarks. So that's something that I think is important. Never use the other person's mic without asking. That goes without saying, but this is for the Rounded Lab group also, and we have some new callers and new cuers in that program. New callers and cuers are where that's going to happen. I would hope that anybody that's been working for a while would not pick up somebody else's mic and use it, but you never know. Never walk through a circle or squares to get to the other side of the hall. If I need to go across the hall while you're out there calling for me, and I walk through the squares, you should stop the dance and tell me to get off the floor as far as I feel about it, you know. Because to me that's totally discourteous. If I go from one side to the other for any reason, I need to go around the outside. That not only disturbs you as a caller, but it disturbs the dancers too. They notice that kind of stuff. And that's just common courtesy. And walking in front of the performer is even worse, because what's he going to do now? And he's walking right here in front of me. Now, is he going to pull one of my plugs, or what's going to happen? Unless you're getting ready to do that, yeah, you know. Show appreciation of the dance, and this is one of John and Carol. John and Deborah's. I can't remember his last name. Anyway, Jones. One of his pet peeves is, how much are we getting applause anymore? We're not getting it like we used to. And as a caller out there on the floor, as soon as that tip's done, I need to be applauding, and that will generate other applause. And as a caller out on the floor, you can do the same thing for the rounds. And you know, we can help each other out, and we can hopefully build that back and get the rapport back that we need to have in getting that kind of stuff in there. Give the same courtesies to your partner if they are the cuer. I have seen a couple cuers that it's a good thing I wasn't their partner or callers, you know, because I would have left. No, I wouldn't take that kind of treatment if she was calling and I had seen the treatment that the partner had received. So just like, you know, if the cuer is not your partner, treat your partner the same way as you would that cuer that is not your partner. Questions, comments? What are you hearing?
I'm hearing you say communicate, 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 communicate. And of course in life that's what works. And when we don't have communication in life, relationships break down, etc. So that's what I hear. And I also hear courtesy to one another, respect.
That's essentially what I think of when I work a festival. The rare ones that I work with where there is square dancing is you have to communicate and you have to have respect for everyone involved, the dancers, the person you're working with as far as the caller. And most of the situations I've worked in have been situations where you're running both callers and cuers in like little cows. So you get the mic for your two little things, and then you're off to the next hall to do it, and then someone else is right behind you for callers and cuers both. But most of those are very structured situations. What Al's talking about is you create the structure on the spot. Most of the things that I go to, they say, okay, we want a phase 2 and a phase 3 right here, and here are the 2 or the 3 that we want. So it's very specified. But in these kind of things where you have to work with each other, communication is the key to really understand, and also the respect for everybody involved, the dancers and your caller and your cuer.
For the tape, that was Judy and Brent Moore.
Barbie Asheville, General Chairman for the 54th National Square Dance Convention. One of the questions I wondered, Al, is when you have your breaks, because I know what has happened in the Oregon area, do you find you lose your dancers if your break's in the middle of the dance? And have your clubs tried anything? Because I know a lot of our clubs have tried, and it seems to be working really well.
The answer to the answer to the first one is that yes, we lose a lot of the dancers as soon as the break is over. They never get out on the floor again. Now, some of those dancers have only danced 2 tips up until that time also. So really we are stretching them to keep them any longer because they are barely able to come out and dance anymore. One club in the area has gone from having their break at 9 o'clock to 9:10 to 9:15 to 9:20, somewhere in there, whenever the caller and cuer can kind of swing it, so they're coming in into that break later and hanging on to their dancers a little bit longer. But still, they're going to get up and leave after the break. They haven't found a real good solution to other than not have the break, and they seem to want the break, or at least the leaders want the break. I should say that. The leaders of the club want the break.
For what it's worth, I think sharing, communicating again is maybe how we all help one another, but our club fought this for a while, but they finally said they'd try it for a year, and I think that's been 2 years ago. We have gone to finger foods, basically, and they put them out about 8:30, and we're fortunate in our hall. We have a place with tables that's away from the dance floor, and so we just make it known to guests that, you know, the food is out now, and it will be there until 10 o'clock, and so just go and help yourself whenever you like. And so people are staying to the end, and then we do our announcements and split the pot at the end of our dance, and people are staying instead of going home. It's been wonderful.
Lee Asheville. My question, Al, is do you lay out your music that you're going to use for the dance before you go? And the reason I ask that, we were just in a session with some callers, and they said one of their pet peeves is the caller who is on the stage rumbling through his record box looking for the next record he's going to do when the dancers are standing on the floor. And I find that same with the round dancing. If I'm standing out there and somebody's pawing through their record box to find one and I get bored, I will go sit down.
That's an excellent question, and no, I do not pull my records for my club dances before the dance. I have 2 and sometimes 3 records that I'm planning on using that night, but I may not use those. That's Linda's job. She pulls my records for my dance as we are dancing. Now, when I'm working on the floor of a club, I do not get into a square until the squares. It appears everybody has filled a square that wants to fill. I am the square filler. So I will have a record ready to go before I get into a square. If I do not fill a square, then I will pull my record while the tip is going. And that is primarily because of who is on the floor, who is capable of doing what, and I know what all the dancers can do. So I'm going to work that level, or Linda's going to work that level for me. And she's, and I pull a lot of records that she says put away. And in fact, I pull more records that she says put away than I use. And she'll tell me which other one to use in place of it. But I've found that if I try to pull too many ahead of time, I'll have so many that I won't have my floor full. And I want to keep that floor full, and she knows how to do that.
I'd like to say that, obviously, I'm Linda Shaw from Boise, Idaho. I'd like to say, obviously, you've never been to an Al dance because he doesn't give you a break. You have to walk off the floor to take a break. And what we've done with our round dance group is most of them are a little bit younger, and about, well, our age, and most of them are still working. They don't want to bring food. They don't want to do potlucks. They just want to come and dance. In fact, we don't even make coffee.
But that's round dances she's talking about, not the squares. But on the squares, yeah. I have 2 records a night that I'm planning on doing. I may or may not, depending on what the floor can handle. And I'll pull them from there. That's my presentation. Skip Heaven.
Margaret Harris from Port St. Lucie, Florida. One thing we have to be careful of is not to be up there pulling our records, though, as the caller is calling. We don't want to bother them either. But we shouldn't leave a big gap between the square and the rounds.
My solution to that is that I do not put my records up on the desk. I have my records down on the side. So, and I use all mini discs, and I have a big book, 4-inch thick book of cue sheets. So we'll hit the cue sheets, and then I'll go pick the mini disc up and walk up and do it. So yeah, you're right. Do not let a cuer come on your stage while you're up there calling. That is a big no-no. I won't let the callers come up while I'm cueing. So, turnabout's fair play.
The other solution for that is this is Brent again. What I do on those occasions is I have my stuff completely away from the stage, off in another corner, and I'm over there sorting out the stuff that I'll need for the next tip, and it has nothing to do with what's happening on the stage. So I bring up what I'm going to use and take it away.
Okay, Brent's going to talk to us a little bit about conventions, big festivals, all kinds of stuff. I wasn't doing this on my own.
All right.
I'm the moderator. What Al said.
I love it. Okay. Most of what Al has talked about in doing a club also applies to a festival, except big festivals are so organized that much of the problems that you face are already taken care of. And a comment about the microphones. Round dancers don't care, or round dance leaders. When we go to do a round dance festival, people lick the same old microphone. I mean, it's like popsicles. So if you do exclusively round dance festivals, the only people that I've seen change out microphones are those who do a lot of square dance festivals as well. Otherwise, really, you watch them. You watch them. Socks. It's unreal. But so it's something I have to be careful about if and when I do a big festival. Is I have to be careful about. This is a big festival, and I have to take my own microphone. Usually, I don't bother because we all just use the same old stuff, and it doesn't. I use even the porta mics. We switch around. It doesn't matter. And so we must be strange or something. But do you feel that way on your rounds? Do you? Oh, but you cue together, so it doesn't matter. Oh, you have your own too? Okay. Yeah. I can understand it, but I hadn't had that experience until I saw that on this list, and I started thinking about it. And I said, really the ones who bring their own microphones are the ones who work a lot in square and round dance clubs or do a lot of square and round dance festivals. Interesting. But back onto our major theme of working together, that's mainly what we have to do is when I go to do a square and round dance event, I'm mainly working not so much with the callers, but with the event organizers. They're the ones who are telling me what they want, where they want it, and when they want it. And so that puts us in a slightly different situation. So I don't have the experience that Al has of working with callers to make a program move along, to be active, to be going to a point, to be going to a theme. So he's our best resource for this particular panel.
This is Linda Shaw again. A question for Brent. If you're on a festival, doing a festival, and they say, well, I want you to do this round and this round in this hall at this time, and you have two couples in there that can't do that dance, do you still go ahead and cue it because it's on the program?
You better bet you. If they've programmed it, I'm going into an area that I'm not familiar with, and if they've programmed that round, I assume they know what they want. And a lot of times I will get a list, and I'll say, they're asking me to cue this. I don't have the music. I've never seen the round before. I have to go dig up a cue sheet from somewhere and write up a cue card and get ready to cue it. This next weekend, they gave me a list, and when I get down to the threes and 2s, I don't have a good inventory of those. My mostly work at 4, 5, 6. And so they say, here's the list, pick 5. I only need 3. So I had to go through their list and say, well, listen, I think I can cue this one pretty easy. So I had to work up a cue card to do it. But they've sent me a list of what they do in their area. So, yes, I cue what what the specs are. I cue to specs.
Tim Crawford. First of all, let me apologize for running out. It's funny when you're talking about common courtesies and my phone rang. I'm sorry about that, but I had everything set up on my computer, but it turned out one of the other panels needed my computer because I have the PowerPoint presentation that the guy that was presenting forgot to bring with him and had my projector that didn't work, and that's why they were calling me. Anyways, so I ran all the way over to the East Building, by the way, and I ran all the way back because when I got there, they had it working. So, anyhow, I'm sorry about that. I just wanted to talk real quickly about some of the challenges that we're kind of preaching to the choir here, because all of us that are here are interested, and we probably are very sensitive to each other when we work with each other. I always like to dwell in the, somebody used the term this morning, the awfulness, or what did Clark call that? The awfuls, or, yeah. We talked about equipment. I'll tell you about an awful story with equipment. I do lots of traveling, mostly square dance events, not too many round dance events with squares. And there is a difference if you go to a round dance event that has squares, or if you go to a square dance event that has rounds. Each one is approached differently. There's a second-class citizen thing that goes on. And it is that way in lots of cases where the round dancers seem to be just, oh, I guess we have to have rounds. So they just kind of throw it together. And that's challenging for our round dance partners in this situation, because we still are trying to produce a show. And we have a responsibility, again, to try to make them an equal part of the show, even where they maybe feel like they're not. So I just want to, talking to us again, I think is really not, we already know that. But when you go back and you talk to your local associations, you need to remind people of that. The equipment, I do lots of traveling, and so I don't take equipment with me a lot other than my own microphone. And I arrive at dances quite frequently, and the round dance cuer is always there graciously with equipment for me to use. And years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I like Hiltons and yaks. So I used to always suggest that if they could arrange a Hilton and a yak to be there, I would be happiest. But occasionally I would forget. And when I would forget, I would arrive there, and it would be a Newcomb with a big folded horn speaker that was set up behind me, which was fine for the local round dance cuer, but for squares it probably didn't work. But as recent as last week, I called the round dance cuer in New York State and said, listen, I'm coming to call the dance on Wednesday night, and I was wondering if I could borrow your equipment rather than me having to bring it. And they said, absolutely, no problem. I said, that's great, thank you very much. I could travel all the way there, and that particular night I didn't take my computer. Instead, I took records, and I arrived at the dance to one of those. All the round dance cuers are technically far more advanced than square dance callers, and they're all using mini discs or computers, and there are not very many turntables at the CALLERLAB convention anymore, and there's not very many round dance cuers who are using turntables. So of course I arrived there without music. There was no music. All we had was the Hilton MDX, well, the 150. That was it. And all I had was records. And all I can say is, thankfully, there are round dances that are square dances. And so when Al talked about having, the dances that are the same name, the same music, we did a lot of that night. So, it's sometimes not good. That was an awful thing. It's not good to arrive at the dance and just have an expectation. When you say, would you have equipment, and they answer yes, you might ask another question about what type of equipment is going to be there. The other, and going back to the part about the courteousness, again, common courtesies should be the way of life, but they are not. And occasionally, I have been at dances where, and I have never actually had a run with the caller, because I consider myself to be fairly laid back and I try to make everybody happy. But I have been at dances where round dance cuers and callers are literally throwing records at each other and accusing each other, and it is an awfulness thing that occurs, and I cannot for the life of me understand why people would do that. But it is, and It is because all of us performers, all we performers are, in fact, ego-driven. And so when you get two egos on the same stage, someone has to manage that. And occasionally you have to be a referee, and sometimes the solution is that there are two sets of equipment on the stage. I've seen that in many, many cases, where you arrive at a dance and there's the round dance cuers equipment, and right next to it there's a table, and that's the square dance college equipment. And there was a reason that it's like that. And it's a historical thing that I don't think is as prevalent anymore, but it was for 20 years ago when I started round dance or square dancing. I still recall when I would go to a dance and they would pay me $100 and pay the round dance cuer $10. And it's been like that. It had been like that for years, and I never understood that. But it was a historical thing all through the years that round dancing was just something that they just kind of threw on the end of it, and it is not that way anymore. In fact, it is part of the success of the evening. Sometimes more than 50% of part of the evening, because we callers are not always driving the dance. We maybe sometimes do work really hard to drive the dance in a certain direction, but we are not all good callers. We are not all good performers, and sometimes we need a round dance cuer to remind us of that and take hold of the performance. And not always this happens. I've also been at dances where we've had two bad performers on stage, and I've been at dances where we have people of this caliber and callers of equal caliber up on stage, and it was just magical. And we should always be trying to strive for that thing, that partnership. And partnership goes way beyond just being on the stage and the microphone. And we're talking about communicating with our partners, and you have to view them that way. And again, talking to us, we probably all do that. But when we go back to our local associations, when you see that happen, you need to remind people that it is a partnership in the performance. And we are performers. So that's my horror stories.
Doug Harris here again. Don't I think that developed in the early 60s when we did our round dancing? They didn't have the cuers the same as they have nowadays. They have some of us sloppy collars, but we're around. And the caller would teach you one dance, put the record and walk away. That's all we danced in. You learn it by heart. No cueing. They just put it on and they did it and come back to square dancing. But they didn't have the cuers and stuff like that. And the cuers started moving in. I think we as callers kind of took offense. Kind of stream of moving in there, using my equipment, doing this, using my mic. Get your own mic. And I think things kind of developed that way until now we're equal, but it wasn't that way to start with, I think.
We've also found that I have more records than he does, I think, now. Round dance, you have to have more records because you've got to give them a variety. Add the different, waltz, two-step, run with chaw, all that.
True. I wanted to relive a horror story that that happened to me. I work with a caller on Friday nights, every other Friday nights up there, and went to his house one night after the dance, I think it was probably, and was talking about programming. And at that time, this caller had not ever come to CALLERLAB that I know of, but he was saying, well, it doesn't really matter what you do on the floor, you can't hurt my dance. I said, yes, I can. I can stop your dance after any tip that I want to. I can just bring your dance to a total halt. And he says, no, there ain't no way. And so I said, okay, the next dance, I'll tell you when I'm going to stop it, and you watch the floor. And so the next dance I did that. Now, I didn't do it after the first tip. I waited until the third tip. After the third tip, I put my slow waltz on that had a few people on the floor, not the normal people that, I normally try to keep the floor as full as possible. But I did it intentionally and told him I was going to do it. And we walked off the floor that night, and he said, you're right. If my cuer doesn't help me, I can't run my dance. So, callers, tell your cuer when they aren't helping you. Tell them that, you hurt my dance tonight, and here's what happened. Here's what I was trying to do. And it's going to take a little finesse sometimes, but, as cuers, we need to know that. And the cuer, Round the Lab, I get Round the Lab and CALLERLAB all confused today. But Round the Lab's going to hear this from me, too. So, hopefully the word will spread.
Lee Asheville, and my question, Tim brought up a point about the pay between the callers and cuers, and then my question to you, is it equal in Idaho? Because in Oregon it still is not equal, and I know that the cuers spend every bit as much money buying records, probably more than the callers do, but their pay still does not reflect that.
No, it is still not equal in Idaho either. There is a dance that is held up there once a year that I know the caller last year got $1,000. The cuer got $100. So, I kind of said, it's a good thing they didn't ask me to do that dance. I'd have told them where they could put it. So.
Well, I'm pretty lucky because I have to split everything. Don Wiggins, well, I split everything down the middle with my wife. So, but she works harder because she does pre-rounds. She does 2 rounds every dip, between dips, and so she has many more records, and she has to work harder than I do. But it is still unequal, and I don't know why. But I guess maybe because the the clubs now have to pay so much for the hall, and they don't have the money to pay equal to both.
Yeah, I don't know the reasoning either, and I'm going to continue queuing. It's not going to bother me a whole lot. I'm out there for the fun of it more than I am for the, if I were wanting to make money out of this, I wouldn't be doing it.
I'm almost sorry I brought up money. I guess when you're talking about programming, I tell you, one of our local festivals at home, we have 1,000 dancers. I think you might have done it last year, Brent. I think, I'm not sure, but did the read to it? Okay. They produce a syllabus, a round dance syllabus, and they'll have rounds between like at the top of the hour and the bottom of the hour in the square dance halls, and in the program it'll actually say the name of the round that's going to be done in this syllabus and on the program. And it amazed me at this festival how many of the callers that were moving room to room just disregarded that entirely. Not that we would necessarily know the name of the dance and what kind of rhythm it would be and whether it would be an upbeat or downbeat, but it was amazing to me that they just disregarded it and didn't pay any attention to what the round was that was going to be there. And it becomes more challenging when it's more structured, because we've talked about how the round and the square should complement one another. We've almost talked how the round dance cuers always compensate or always change their program in light of the square. But we don't talk in a lot of terms where the other way around, where the square dance caller follows the round. But that's equally as important. The round dance cuers are actually gracious to be able to follow the squares and keep the dance going for us. Because like you said, they have the control, in some cases, the ability to really impact the evening completely. But so do the squares. Sometimes the rounds drive it just like the squares. You have to be conscious of that as well. And the more structured it is, the harder it is to be able to complement one another. And I find quite often that you see the syllabuses that are produced, that's usually a round dance festival and a square dance festival. It's not a square dance festival with rounds when you get the syllabus, because the syllabus is something that round dance cuers spend lots of time and effort putting together. They actually program the dances, but they have no way to know what the squares will be in the middle of it. So the squares actually have to complement the rounds. But it amazes me how few times callers actually take time to look at that syllabus and try to determine, even looking back 2 hours and see what rounds had occurred and what callers were in there, and trying to figure out where the evening might be at that point, or where the afternoon might be at that point. It's always the round dance cuer that tends to follow what the square dance caller was doing, and it's not always that way.
I'm back to Al again. The one caller that I work with a lot, well, in fact, all the callers I work with in Boise, I can predict what their program is going to be for the night, because, as callers, you kind of set up a program and follow the same kind of general routine. Well, this one caller that I work with on the one that I stopped his dance, I know how he's going to flow, so my rounds kind of help his flow. I kind of know what the next song's going to be in tempo or whatever, and how he's going to build a dance. But one night he totally changed the program on me and didn't tell me he was changing it. And I had it programmed to move his dance up, and all of a sudden he's going down when I think he should be going up. And so I totally flip-flopped his program and he realized it about the same time that I realized it. And by that time it was too late for both of us to recover. I mean, yeah, we kept the dance going, but it was not the build and the release and the build again that he wanted. So if you're going to do something like that and change your programming, let the cuer know ahead of time that this is the way I'm going to try it tonight. I want to try a new procedure. And let the cuer know a little bit ahead of time, and then the cuer can work with it a little bit. One other dance that I did in Boise was a weekend, and the caller came in, and we talked about it ahead of time, and I said, here's the waltzes and the two steps, and we're only doing one round between tips, and this is going to, how are you going to build your program? And he kind of explained it to me. I said, here's what I'm going to use, and then about the second or third or fourth one, Linda says, we need to use this song, and we need to use this song, and that dance started building. He tried to slow it down. We went for 2.5 hours that night, and it built the whole way. There was no way you were going to slow that dance down all night, and I don't know, it has never been duplicated. I have not worked with him again, but maybe it would happen again. I don't know. But he couldn't get it to lower. I put songs on that I thought would lower it. It would not lower that night for some reason. So sometimes the things that you try won't work. They're just going to go no matter what you do.
This is Linda. I think I know why. I think it's because we had a theme and we were doing something different to what they had ever done before. We were having a big problem keeping squares on the floor. They like to come out there and sit and yak, and the caller can get them up off their seat. So we did a weekend, and we did casino nights. And we gave them prizes for dancing. We gave them tickets every time they got on the floor. All the tickets they could put in buckets to win prizes. And so the more tickets they got, the more prizes they got to win. And they kept getting on the floor and on the floor and on the floor, and the dance kept building and building and building, and it was John Quasar was the caller.
Lee Ashwell, and unfortunately there's a division between round dancing and square dancing. Barb and I have been strong proponents trying to get that back together in Oregon. Our summer festivals have never dictated what rounds needed to be cued during the festival. But we chaired a festival in 2002, and Ray and Virginia were our cuers. We got with Ray and Virginia and said, what we want at our summer festival, we want no rounds higher than phase 3. We want square dance rounds. The cuers that we have hired before were very strong 4, 5, and 6. We found that floor was packed the entire festival with the 2 3s, and we think that we made giant inroads on that one.
Okay, just another awfulness. It wasn't awful. It was kind of comical. Technology, again, in square dancing and round dancing. We talked about wireless microphones, and quite often round dance cuers will have the wireless microphone that's on their head, and they're just amazing pieces of equipment. Absolutely amazing, unless they forget to turn them off. And that's how we had a dance where a round dance cuer came down off the stage, and somebody said, boy, that's really, really great. I'd sure like to talk to you about coming and cueing at our dance. And so they went outside. And everybody heard the negotiation about how much he was going to get paid and when the dance was. And we couldn't find them. That was the other part. There's not like a trail up. Well, we figured that out eventually, that we could turn it off. But it was actually quite amusing. Yeah.
Doug here again. My mic was still on, so I come back to the club. I open the door up, and I got a hand clap for everything. And she's at the main mic, screaming and yelling, trying to quiet everybody down.
The remote mic I use now is a headset, but it's easy to lift off. And when I leave the stage, I lift my headset off and leave it on the stage. That saves a lot of that problem.
We were talking about money a little while ago. It is still an unequitable thing. There's no question. And I do know that there's more and more callers that run weekends where round dance cuers are part of it. That they are equal partnerships now. I think we've come a long way from where we were 20 years ago with respect to that, and how the callers are approaching, not just callers. I shouldn't say callers, but organizers actually of dance. Sometimes callers, sometimes round dance cuers, and sometimes dancers. There has been a leveling of the the money. But I can even remember at times when round dance people were part of a staff until it came things for dinners and things for like after parties. They were excluded from after parties, and they were obvious by their absence. And I think we've come a long way to draw them back into the the dance ends, but that's not always where the show ends. And sometimes there's an after party, sometimes there's things, and we as callers and organizers have to remember to include everybody in everything whenever possible.
This is Brent again. Along that same line, we have the same problem in both squares and in rounds as separate activities, in that I think a lot of the range of levels and trying to focus on the level you want to dance has created a loss of connection that brings new people in. And that's something that, especially in round, and I think squares suffer from the same thing, that the levels, there's a social aspect to our activity that we're neglecting. And that's the constant reaching down and pulling people in. And that's why ballroom is so successful. And ballroom's pretty popular now in our area and other areas too, because in ballroom it doesn't matter. You can have some very advanced dancers on the floor with the same people who just started last week, and they're very compatible. But in rounds and squares, that compatibility is not built in. You have to work to achieve it. And always keeping programs that reach both ways is very difficult to do, financially and physically, to keep everybody happy. And a large part of the driver is dancers themselves. You really have to work to encourage dancers to be willing to reach down and bring other people along. And so, and talking back about the money, I think a large part of that is the tradition. The way it started off. Rounds started off as kind of a filler. It was something that just somebody wanted to do when there wasn't anything happening between the tips. Instead of resting, well, I want to dance a little bit. So they just started doing it, and it just kind of was a secondary thing. Absolutely secondary for a long time. And then it kind of got a little bit formalized, as you said. Somebody took a few ballroom lessons, and they says, well, we can make this a little bit better. And they start developing it a little bit, and it becomes more professional. And so, but it's still like everything else. It's like the difference in salaries for doing the same job between the sexes. The same sort of thing.
I always joke, not joke, but whenever there's a round dance demonstration, I'll always make the point that I, as a square dance caller, have never had to get down on the floor and do a demonstration in the middle of a dance. So they're doing part of the show. I mean, it's beautiful that when they do these demonstrations, they work so hard on them, but I've never had to do that.
Somebody else got something to say while I'm thinking about it again?
Mike Oliveri, Denver. And I would like to say that being a caller, it seems like you run across two different situations. You run across one where you've got two different entities up on stage. You've got the caller, you've got the cuer, neither one of them are really communicating or doing anything together. And yet some of the best dances I've had have been where the cuer and the caller, myself, kind of pick on each other. Not in an abusive way, but we challenge each other, and the dancers absolutely love it. I can't remember the exact name of the call. Sunburst? Starburst? In round dancing? Where both hands are up, or maybe he made it up. I don't know. Anyway. Sunburst. Okay. Right. Okay. So the cuer did Sunburst, and he looks at me and he says, "Do you have Sunburst in square dancing?" And I says, "We do now." And the dancers are like, okay, how's he going to do this? So, you get to a certain point, you do an Allemande left and weave the ring with Sunburst, and the whole floor is, going around weaving the ring, doing, and then the gauntlet was down, and the dancers are like, okay, what's coming up next? And it works great. But you've got to have that relationship in order to do that. Now, my question for you as far as RounderLab, I had a dance a couple weeks ago. The cuer showed up 1 minute before pre-round started. Who addresses that? The caller or the club?
It probably should be addressed by the person that is hiring the cuer. If that happens to, if the caller shows up, I'm going to address it to him. right there. And you know, if you didn't address it to the caller or to the cuer, then I would say you should have. But technically, yeah, it should go back to the person that hired you, unless there was extenuating circumstances, and you know sometimes that occurs. But that's not something that should be happening.
Well, Don Wiggins, we've had that happen before, to where my wife gets hired to do the queuing, and there's pre-rounds, and of course we get there to do the pre-rounds, and we weren't told to bring our own equipment, but we always do. But then the caller doesn't show up till 5 minutes before the dance. So if we didn't bring our equipment, then how are we going to do the pre-rounds? So that should be done by, if they're pre-rounds, they should tell the caller, if we're going to use their equipment, you show up a half hour early so we can do the pre-rounds. Yes.
Yeah, and that's communication again, like I was talking to begin with. Whenever the cuer knows who he or she is working with, get a hold of that caller as soon as you know about it. And if you're local and you know what the procedure is, it's not as important. But if I'm going to go work for somebody else, I'm going to call them as far ahead as I can and say, here's what I'm planning on bringing, what are you planning on bringing, and what are we going to use, and go from there.
Donald, I appreciate your comment, really, and Lee, about it being in the contract. That's absolutely what should happen. The downside of that would mean that the caller would have to read some part of the contract other than what he's being paid. And callers are not really good at that. But the contracts are, CALLERLAB actually, it's funny that you should even mention this. CALLERLAB actually has a contract that we supply free of charge to callers, and there's two parts that would make you think that if they put those two things together, they would understand that they have to be there in time for pre-rounds. It says that there will be pre-rounds, checked out, and that the caller will supply the sound equipment. And you would think that they would be able to read that contract and know that they were there, but you'd be surprised how many times even me have arrived at the dance at 7:35 to find everybody standing there while I'm unloading my equipment happily, and I have to flip the contract out and look at it and go, well, there you go. So
the other thing I was going to talk about a little while ago is communicating with the organizations that hire us. If you as a caller look at a contract and it's, the rounds are programmed already, and you know that they're going to hurt your program, you need to be talking to the organizer also. If I as a cuer see that, I'm going to talk to him. You can bet I'm going to talk to him and say, hey, especially after I've talked to the caller, if they're not going to be compatible and it's not going to build a good dance, the organizers need to know it ahead of time. And a lot of organizers have no clue about building a dance. They say, oh, we get the facilities and we hire two people and we tell them what to do, and it's going to be a good dance, and that's not true. They can't put stuff together that doesn't work. So as callers and cuers, we need to tell them if it's not going to work and why it's not going to work, more importantly.
Is there any other comments? Any more horror stories? Oh, no! You were so quiet for so long, Skip. I thought you were sleeping over here.
No, I'm Skip Brown from Portland, Maine. My wife, Betty Ann. I've been calling nearly 30 years, and she's been queuing since 1988. And we get, let me be your shade tree, okay? It's sun. Oh, it's all right. I'm blocked, yeah. And we get along very, very well together. We're talking about equipment. When we go, we like to use our own equipment because we consider what we have as good as they have, state-of-the-art, and she and I both sound nice on it. If we use somebody else's, we're not sure what we get, and we like to protect our reputation. So she cues a dance with another caller. I put in a contract that we will set up our equipment. That way we know that pre-rounds are going to start on time, and she's going to sound good. We offer the caller the chance to use it. We'll send them an email. Don't bring just bring your records and your microphone. Some do, some don't. And you talk about caller and cuer saving each other's dance or working against each other's dance. We've never had that problem. She cues a dance. I call a dance. It's basically two dances, but they're like vines. They intertwine. They work well together. She doesn't stop my momentum, and I don't stop her momentum. If she puts on a slow downer and I'm coming up next, then I'll say, okay, nap time's over, and put on a wild hoedown and get them back up. And if she finishes with Hooked on Swing, I'll put on a lazy hoedown and let them relax a little bit. We all work together. And we do banter back and forth, don't we? Started years ago. She's teaching something. I'm out on the floor, and we demonstrated the move. I thought we were done, and I walked off the floor. She says, I haven't dismissed you yet. But we do get along very, very well. The only other comment I want to make is on the money. It's true that I guess $100 and $10 30 years ago was standard. Now up in our area, it seems to be about half. If I get 100, she gets 50, basically. It's increased. But I think there is a little bit of difference between what a cuer does and what a caller does. Basically, if I can use it in square dance terms, a cuer gets up in between square dance tips and does 2 singing calls. It's a piece of music. You're stuck with the choreography. You can't change it. You're not allowed to change it. The well, she does from time to time. And you're on 5 to 6 minutes. And the square dance call, like I said, he does a singing call. He may or may not change the figure in it. It's his option. The first piece of music is a hoedown record. It's just a good, strong, rhythmical record. And he has 100 or 150 various movements that he can put any combination in anytime he wants. He creates choreography on the go. And I'm not tooting the caller's horns or anything else, making the caller better than the cuer. But what the caller does is a little different than what the cuer does, and maybe a little bit more monetary reward is not that much out of line. I don't say 2-to-1 ratio is fair, but maybe a little bit more. That's all I have to say. Now my wife will apologize for me.
I just want to say it depends where you're cueing, too. If I'm cueing in the area, I know what the dancers do. We always have pre-rounds. We always have a high level and a low level. We have a little higher level in the middle, or they have A1 tips. You know, and I know what I'm going to do before I get there unless somebody else wants something. In our area, the people often write requests. I'm not one that really likes this. I probably should bring it up more to Roundalab, but I don't really like this because your stronger dancers are the ones that get out there and they write the ones they want, and the poor little other people, and I like to do everything that people ask. So I try to balance all of that. Another thing for the callers, and I don't know how frustrated the callers get sometimes, but how much time is there between when the caller gets off the stage and the cuer gets up? I think I've heard a lot of callers say, and I've heard cuers say, he's out there, and they're not up there. They should be, calling and cueing. And I firmly believe in that. People came to dance. They have the option of sitting out if they would like. But I think that we should all be prepared to be there when we're supposed to be.
Hey, Stark here again. I had a few complaints about the odd score dancer. This is, I wish you didn't have that round dancing at our club. I'm being curious. She has the 2, I do 1. And it says, it's taking up our square dance time. Okay, well, fix that. So I call it up. And I said, don't get off the floor. It's not rest time yet. I'm starting the next step because there's no break. You said we couldn't have the breaks for the round dance, so I guess we don't need breaks. So don't get off the floor. We'll continue the square dance. Your breaks are no breaks anymore. You asked for that. And I said it kind of sarcastically. That kind of, everybody laughed and curved that, but I got past it successfully. Thank you. It could have been bad, too, but it didn't. We have another advantage of we're the only skirt round dance club within a 50-mile radius, so any of the clubs in our area, 3 or 4 of them we do go to, Mark knows, and we both know what all the dancers can do, which is a big advantage to us.
You're fortunate that both of you operate as a team, both of you. And you probably subconsciously do everything that everybody else has to consciously do because you've been doing it so long, you just know already. That's right, yeah. I just want to comment quickly on the guy who complained to you. I get that occasionally. People going out upstairs, why do we have to have rounds at the Square Dance Club? And I'll tell them, I'll usually say it's not a valid complaint. You're not within your rights to complain because it's advertised that way. If you had read the flyer, you would have known that there was rounds, and you would have been prepared. So your complaint is really not valid at that point, usually. I don't usually tell them in that words how you find a nice way to tell them to shut up. But really, when people do complain about that, they're missing the picture too. You know, it's the big picture that we're really trying to achieve when we try to make a partnership with our round dance cure. It's about the evening show. It's not about each little sliver of each 15 minutes or every 10 minutes of round dancing and every 20 minutes of calling. It's really about how it all goes together. I think you said weaving together, twining together. I mean, that pretty much sums it up. It is one. A vine is made of a whole bunch of little twigs, but it is a single vine.
This is Linda again. I'd like Al to tell you about what happened at one of our festivals with a caller and his wife that was the cure.
It is. You pass this ball back and forth. I don't know if I was out of place or not, but I probably was, as is my nature. That's right. But the cure was up, and it was a weekend festival, and the wife was the cure. The husband, who both are here this weekend, was the caller, and she was cueing, and he was on the floor having a conversation right in front of her, and I was trying to hear the cues, and I could not hear the cues over his conversation, or I was getting part of it. That's before I got my new ears. I probably still couldn't hear it, but anyway. So I went up and asked him to please move off to the side, and he just kind of looked at me like, what do you mean, move off to the side? So at the end of the dance, I went up, and by that time I was hot. So obviously I did not tell him very nicely this time, if you want to talk, get off the floor. And he said, it's my wife, and she doesn't mind me standing here. I said, well, I do, so get off the floor. And he said, I'm going to be here. So he stayed there. I left the dance. Right, wrong, or otherwise, you know, I would have appreciated it had he left, or had he gotten off to the side so I could at least heard what the cues were. And it started out with one person. It ended up with almost 10 people standing right, and I mean, they were standing as close as Marsh is to me from the cure talking. And I don't know. I can't live with that.
His actual comment, and that was why we put treat your partner, if she's the cure or he's the cure, like you would if it was a stranger. His comment was, well, she's my wife, she's used to it.
Yeah. I want to go back and talk about the money again for just a brief moment. We're talking about the cure's not getting as much when it's a square dance program. And, you know, I don't really feel uncomfortable with that. If it's a round dance program, then the cure's probably going to get more than the caller does. It's probably going to flip-flop the other way, or at least it's going to come down to 50-50 on that. And I don't know if you've ever worked a round dance program, but we used to run a round dance Christmas dance with squares. We had five rounds and a half a tip. 5 rounds and a half a tip. And we ran it needle to needle. And we ran that for probably 5 or 6 years. We had square dancers coming out that could not round dance just to come to the program. You know, and they would set out 5 rounds and do a half a tip, and set out 5 rounds and do a half a tip. And it worked really good for us. Of course, neither one of us got any money out of it, but oh, the one caller that I worked with on occasion on Friday nights, he came out and cued or called for us that evening. He called more tips that night in 2.5 hours than he normally called at a 2.5 hour dance. It was a square dance with rounds between. He said, I'm not queuing for you guys no more. You work me to death.
We are just about out of time, believe it or not. And I know there are some Birds of Feather sessions starting at 5, so unless there's any other final comments, sort of, when I say unless there, it kind of means there will be no more time for comment.
My one cure horror story. 25 years ago, I called a dance with a cure that was well known in my area, who no longer cues, and I won't identify the person. But after the first tip, the cure got up and put the round on. I said, oh, this is going to be good. We're going to just zip right through this dance. Put the round on, started playing it, and sat down and let the whole record play. Then get up and cued it. And that cue did that for the whole night. Yeah. I haven't been queuing that. I haven't been calling that long. You know, I was afraid of cuers. I was. I still am, you know. Thank you all.
Well, help me. Oh, do you want to say something?
We were supposed to have an attendance list, and I didn't find the list up there. So I've written down all the names except your. I can't read your badge from here. No. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's the moderator's job. I'm sorry. But it's all on my computer, which is in another room. Apparently doesn't work. Please help me thank the Moores and the Shaws for being part of this. Thank you for coming this afternoon, and enjoy the rest of the convention. We'll see you at dinner.